The Cold War, a 44-year standoff, gripped the world with espionage, propaganda, and nuclear threats. Post-World War II, US-Soviet tensions grew, revealing deep ideological rifts. The US adopted containment, while the Soviet Union solidified control over Eastern Europe. Churchill's Iron Curtain speech highlighted the growing East-West divide. The Truman Doctrine and Marshall Plan globalized the Cold War, opposing communist expansion. The Berlin airlift symbolized Western resistance against Soviet aggression. The Korean War and nuclear arms race marked Cold War brinkmanship. The Cuban Missile Crisis brought the world to the brink of nuclear war. The space race became a symbolic battleground for Cold War supremacy. The Cold War, a clash of ideologies and ambitions played out on a global scale, was profoundly shaped by the personalities and decisions of a handful of powerful individuals. These men, leading their respective nations through an era of unprecedented tension and uncertainty, held the fate of the world in their hands. Their decisions, often made in the face of immense pressure and with limited information, had far-reaching consequences, shaping the course of history and leaving an indelible mark on international relations. Joseph Stalin, the enigmatic and ruthless dictator of the Soviet Union, emerged from the Second World War determined to solidify his nation's security and expand its sphere of influence. His vision of a post-war world, one dominated by Soviet power and communist ideology, put him on a collision course with the West, particularly the United States. Stalin's paranoia, his unwavering belief in communist dogma, and his brutal suppression of dissent within the Soviet bloc cast a long shadow over the early decades of the Cold War. On the other side of the ideological divide stood Harry S. Truman, the plain-spoken president from Missouri, who found himself thrust onto the world stage at a pivotal moment in history. Tasked with guiding the United States through the uncertain post-war years, Truman adopted a policy of containment, aimed at halting the spread of communism and confronting Soviet expansionism wherever it might arise. His decisions, from the Truman Doctrine to the Marshall Plan to the intervention in Korea, set the stage for a protracted global rivalry with the Soviet Union. These men, along with other key figures like Winston Churchill, Nikita Khrushchev, John F. Kennedy, and Ronald Reagan, each played a pivotal role in shaping the trajectory of the Cold War. Their leadership, their miscalculations, and their moments of both confrontation and cooperation left an enduring legacy on international relations, shaping the world we live in today. Section 2. Stalin, architect of the Iron Curtain. Joseph Stalin, born Josip Vissarionis Dzhugashvili in the small Georgian village of Gori in 1878, rose from humble beginnings to become one of the most powerful and feared dictators in history. His transformation from a young revolutionary to the iron-fisted ruler of the Soviet Union is a tale of ambition, ruthlessness, and unwavering belief in the communist ideology. Stalin's early years were marked by poverty, instability, and a growing fascination with Marxist ideology. He joined the Bolshevik Party in 1898, becoming deeply involved in the underground movement to overthrow the Tsarist regime. Following the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917, Stalin gradually consolidated his power within the Communist Party, eventually succeeding Lenin as leader of the Soviet Union in 1924. Under Stalin's rule, the Soviet Union underwent a period of rapid industrialization and collectivization, often at a tremendous human cost. His policies, designed to transform the Soviet Union into a modern industrial power, resulted in widespread famine, the deaths of millions through forced labor and executions, and the creation of a vast system of gulags, or forced labor camps, where political prisoners and perceived enemies of the state were sent. Stalin's paranoia and his unwavering belief in his own infallibility led to the Great Purge of the 1930s, a period of intense political repression during which millions of Soviet citizens were arrested, executed, or sent to labor camps. Anyone perceived as a threat to Stalin's power, including members of his own inner circle, was eliminated. This reign of terror created a climate of fear and suspicion that permeated Soviet society for decades. Section 3. Truman, the buck stops here. Harry S. Truman, born in Lamar, Missouri in 1884, rose to become the 33rd President of the United States. Thrust into the presidency in 1945, Truman led the nation through the final months of World War II. Known for his plain-spoken style, Truman made decisive, often controversial decisions. He authorized the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki to end the war in the Pacific. This decision ushered in the atomic age and influenced the Cold War. Truman's foreign policy aimed at containing communism, leading to the Truman Doctrine and NATO. His leadership laid the foundation for the United States' role as a global superpower. Truman's motto, "The buck stops here," reflected his belief in taking responsibility for his actions. Section 1. A world divided, alliances forged and tested. The Cold War, though often characterized by its ideological battle between capitalism and communism, played out on a global chessboard, drawing nations into its web of alliances and rivalries. The two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, sought to expand their spheres of influence, forging alliances and supporting regimes that aligned with their respective ideologies. These alliances, often formed out of necessity rather than shared values, created a complex and often unstable geopolitical landscape. In 1949, the United States, Canada, and several Western European nations formed the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, a military alliance founded on the principle of collective defense. NATO, a cornerstone of US Cold War strategy, sought to deter Soviet aggression in Europe by pledging that an attack on one member would be considered an attack on all. The formation of NATO cemented the division of Europe into two armed camps, with the Soviet Union and its satellite states in Eastern Europe forming the opposing Warsaw Pact in 1955. The Cold War rivalry extended far beyond Europe, however. Both superpowers sought to cultivate alliances and support friendly regimes in Asia, Africa, and Latin America, often becoming embroiled in regional conflicts and propping up authoritarian leaders who pledged allegiance to their cause. These proxy wars, fought on battlefields far from the superpowers' own borders, became a tragic and often overlooked aspect of the Cold War, resulting in millions of casualties and sowing the seeds of instability that would plague many regions for decades to come. The formation of these alliances, while ostensibly aimed at maintaining stability and deterring aggression, often had the unintended consequence of exacerbating tensions and fueling regional conflict. The Cold War became a global struggle for influence, with the two superpowers vying for control not only of territory but also of ideas and resources, leaving a legacy of division and mistrust that would continue to shape international relations long after the Cold War itself had ended. Beyond the Iron Curtain, proxy wars and global repercussions. While the threat of nuclear war loomed large, the Cold War was fought on the peripheries in proxy wars waged in developing countries. These conflicts, fueled by ideological rivalries, brought suffering and instability to many regions. The Korean War exemplified the devastating consequences of this global rivalry. The Vietnam War became a defining conflict of the Cold War, epitomizing the human cost and moral complexities of proxy wars. Proxy wars raged globally, fueled by Cold War rivalries. The superpowers provided military and economic aid to their proxies, exacerbating tensions and fueling cycles of violence. These conflicts shaped global perceptions and left a legacy of instability. The cultural battleground ideas, espionage, and the war of narratives. The Cold War was not merely a clash of military might and geopolitical maneuvering. It was also a battle for hearts and minds, a struggle to win the hearts and minds of people across the globe. Both superpowers recognized the importance of shaping public opinion, both domestically and internationally, and engaged in sophisticated propaganda campaigns designed to extol the virtues of their respective systems and demonize their adversaries. The United States, championing democracy, individual liberty, and free markets, sought to portray the Soviet Union as a totalitarian regime that suppressed individual freedoms and sought to impose its communist ideology on the world. The Soviet Union, on the other hand, promoted itself as a champion of the working class, striving for social justice and economic equality, while painting the United States as an imperialist power bent on exploiting the developing world. These competing narratives played out in various arenas, from radio broadcasts and television programs to films, literature, and music. Both sides invested heavily in cultural diplomacy, sponsoring artistic exchanges, sending delegations abroad, and supporting institutions that promoted their respective ideologies. Espionage also played a significant role in the cultural battleground, with both sides utilizing spies and intelligence agencies to gather information, spread disinformation, and undermine their adversaries' cultural influence. The Cold War era witnessed a flourishing of artistic expression, often reflecting the anxieties, tensions, and ideological struggles of the time. From the abstract expressionism of Jackson Pollock to the dissident literature of Alexander Solzhenitsyn, artists grappled with the complexities of a world divided. The Cold War, while a period of great tension and uncertainty, also fostered a climate of intellectual and artistic ferment, as artists and thinkers on both sides of the Iron Curtain sought to make sense of a world on the brink. The thaw and the aftermath. The latter decades of the Cold War saw a thawing of relations, marked by arms control agreements and increased diplomacy. The Helsinki Accords of 1975 promoted cooperation and reduced tensions. Gorbachev's reforms led to the fall of the Berlin Wall and the Soviet Union's collapse. The end of the Cold War ushered in a new world order with the US as the sole superpower. The legacy of the Cold War continues to shape international relations today. Lessons of a bygone era. The Cold War, a period of great tension, offers valuable lessons for today. It highlighted the dangers of unchecked ambition and the importance of diplomacy. The Cuban Missile Crisis underscored the need for open communication. Arms control agreements showed that even rivals can find common ground. The Cold War's cultural battleground remains relevant today. Preventing nuclear proliferation is a shared responsibility. The lessons of the Cold War offer insights into international relations.